You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And again, as I do every week, I thank all of you for all your support and sharing individual podcasts or our entire show with friends and family. So many of you are listening to the show on many of the podcast stations, on Apple Podcasts. That's a big one that people go to, but it's certainly on Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, many of the others. Pretty much every podcast station out there we're on. Or you could go, directly to our, website at boomerstodayradio.com. So again, thank you so much for doing that. And I know why you do, because we got great shows. We've got great guests. And I'm certainly not going to disappoint you today. We have kind of a unique service that we're going to be talking about, and a wonderful person by the name of Bob Bacheler. Bob is the owner and managing director of Flying Angels Incorporated, based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he manages a team of medical escorts comprised of highly skilled nurses and doctors. In addition to being a critical care registered nurse, Bob is a certified flight registered nurse, a transport practitioner, advanced trauma provider, has a certification in travel health from the International Society of Travel Medicine, and is a certified dementia practitioner. For several years, Bob had the privilege to serve on the board of directors for Air and Surface Transports Nurses Association, where he had the opportunity to directly impact issues relating to the transportation of patients through the means of helicopters, fixed-wing planes, and medical escorts. So, Bob, wow, that was a mouthful, but you've got just such a wonderful background, and thank you for all you do, and thanks for joining us on Boomers Today. Really appreciate it.
No, Frank, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Yeah, so we brought up medical escorts term. I think I said a couple times in introducing you. Maybe we could start out with that. What is a medical escort exactly?
So what a medical escort does is, this is a healthcare practitioner, a nurse, or a doctor who will accompany somebody who has medical needs on commercial airlines. Let's say you have an elderly person with dementia who's in a nursing home in Florida who needs to be transported up to another facility in New York. How does somebody do that? Well, you can put them in a car and drive them for 18 hours, or you can charter an air ambulance to fly them up. But often the best, most economical way to do it is to contract with a service that provides a registered nurse to go down, pick the loved one up, fly them on a commercial airline, a regular scheduled flight, Delta, United, American, and take them from where they are to where to go. And this can be done domestically and internationally.
Wow. Okay. And kind of leading into Flying Angels, a company that you own and manage, that's pretty much, we could get in more specifics, but that's what you do, right? That's your service. Maybe tell us a little bit more, though, about Flying Angels.
Sure. So Flying Angels is based here in Philadelphia, but we have a team of critical care registered nurses and doctors all across the country who work for us, flying patients around the country. We transport folks, again, who have cognitive impairments, dementia. We do a lot of work with immobile folks. We do a lot of work with the spinal cord rehabilitation centers around the hospital. There's some real centers of excellence, Craig Hospital in Denver, Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Shirley Ryan Ability Lab up in Chicago, and they're bringing people in who have suffered strokes, who have had traumatic brain injuries, who have suffered spinal cord injuries, and they need to get into these facilities for rehab. Now, the patient population that they're transporting doesn't necessarily need the ICU level of care of an air ambulance, but yet at the same time, it's usually beyond the family's capability to comfortably and safely do that. So that's why somebody would reach out to us and say, hey, my loved one, had a stroke in California, and we need them transported to a rehabilitation center close to home, maybe across the country. It may be maybe around the world. We're often called upon to help people who have been injured overseas and bring them back to the U.S., or folks who are foreign nationals who are here in the United States and who fall ill or need assistance and need to get back to their home countries.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a wonderful service. You got a great background in it. What made you? How did you start? I mean, what was your incentive for starting Flying Angels and doing this?
Well, I've been a nurse for 30 years now. I'm still trying to figure out where that time went.
Yeah.
But as a guy in nursing, guys tend to gravitate to the exciting things. So my career path for the first, 10 years or so was ICU, critical care, trauma, burn, all the exciting adrenaline stuff. I would kid everybody that I worked the trauma a lot on Friday nights in the Center City, Philadelphia hospitals. And people would often comment, Bob, you're so cool and so calm under fire. And my response was always, well, I actually have a wife with 3 kids under 5 years old at home, so I've got the easy job. But that said, I always had a passion for critical care, for ICU, and at the same time, I also had a real passion for aviation. I love just going down to the airports. I love watching airplanes. So I always kind of knew that somewhere along the line, those two passions were going to meet. My first goal was to become a rotor wing nurse, a helicopter nurse, if you will. Mm-hmm. The problem I ran into was I live in Philadelphia, and if you live out in the rural areas, it's difficult but attainable to become a flight nurse on a rotor wing program. The problem in Philadelphia is when you have 5 level 1 trauma centers, within 5 miles, we have a few helicopter programs, but you probably have 20,000 very qualified applicants. So that path was pretty difficult, but I knew that the airport was there. So I wound up flying people, flying friends, flying relatives, places where they need to go, on the commercial airlines, flying out of Philadelphia. And that was 17 years ago. And here we are 17 years later, and we have a terrific team of doctors and nurses all across the country flying people around.
That's fantastic. So that leads me to my next question about the nurses and the doctors. Okay. So what try to describe kind of what would be their pretty much basic duties in accompanying a client passenger on a commercial airline.
Well, our patients are usually kind of mobility impaired, may have cognitive impairment, may need oxygen, any other kind of, basic life support function. So what our nurses do now, all of our programs, whenever we transport somebody, let me back up just a little bit. It really starts with our flight coordinators, who are the people who put the cases together. So if you have somebody call into us and they say, hey, we want to transport our mother from Florida to New York, our flight coordinators put together an entire program for the family. In other words, it's bedside to bedside service, where we're arranging for the ground transportation to pick the person up and then take them to the airport. And then we're arranging for the flights. We're actually, we're a travel agency unto ourselves. So we're doing all of that. and then we're arranging for the ground transportation to get them home. And that may be in a car, it may be in an ambulance, it may be in a wheelchair van. And then our flight coordinators, in coordination with the sending facility, will come up with a complete plan, make sure all the details are taken care of, and then our flight nurse will go out and meet with the patient the day before they're going to travel, and then assess them, make sure everything is copacetic, and then on the day of travel, our flight nurse will come out, pick the person up, take them to the airport in a car or a wheelchair van. We tend to use a lot of wheelchair vans. Our nurses have our own custom reclining wheelchairs that we use for our immobile patients. A lot of times people don't realize that for a 4-hour flight, you're probably looking at another 4 hours of time around that flight. In other words, the time getting to the airport, the 2 hours at the airport. Then you're landing, and then you may have an hour or so after the flight to get the person where they need to go. So, the flight time itself is only a portion of the overall transport, but our nurse will take care of the patient, make sure they're getting through security, make sure they're checked in, and then make sure that they get on the flight safely. Our patients do fly first class when they're traveling domestically, and when they're flying internationally, they're going to fly in business class.
So they are flying in that class of service because that is a requirement that you provide on them, or why?
Well, for any number.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's absolutely terrific question. So, for our mobility impaired patients, we don't want to try to get them back to row 36 on a commercial airline. We prefer to have them in row 1 for the ease of mobility. Plus, for those people who have flown, the economy seats are often very, very cramped. And, you don't want to be trying to get somebody who's mobility impaired into a seat. Now, for people who are cognitively impaired, you certainly don't want to try to get them into an economy seat, because what'll happen is you're taking them down a jet bridge, which can cause anxiety, and then you're getting them on an airplane. And a lot of folks with dementia or other cognitive impairments will have tunnel vision, so they will look down the long tube of an airplane, and their anxiety will increase significantly. So the easiest way to alleviate that is you get them on the plane and you just sit them right down in the first class seat. So it really is about decreasing the anxiety for our cognitively impaired clients, and it's about safety and mobility for our mobility impaired patients.
That makes a lot of sense.
While on the plane.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
While on the plane, our nurses will be monitoring the patient's blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation. In many cases, our nurses are taking oxygen equipment with them just in case. You don't want to have somebody having pulmonary problems on an airplane. I often say that our nurses are there to prevent emergencies as much more than they are there to react to emergencies. That's kind of one of the keys I always like to stress. It's not somebody there to prevent to react to something bad happening. It's there to make sure nothing bad happens in the first place.
Right. Great.
And they're also there to coordinate the folks at the airport to help get the person on and off the aircraft.
So I was going to ask that, the travel industry, especially in the airline industry, has changed significantly over the years. We all feel it. The service, at least I think generally speaking, is not as great as it used to be. Customer service is not as great as it once was. How does your team ensure families that all these, everything that has to be prepared for a flight for one of your patients is all kind of taken care of with that airline? I mean, do you just call regular reservations to do this, or do you have a special team of people at the various airlines that you work with?
Well, it's a combination of both. Again, as I mentioned, we are our own travel agency. We are an ARC accredited travel agent. We have a dedicated travel team in-house who manages all of our flight reservations. The advantage of that is if there is a change, and while the vast majority of our flights go completely uncomplicated, there is the chance of having weather delays or having any other problem. The other day in Philadelphia, we had there was two planes, that impacted each other. I was actually on one of the planes that was involved in that. I like to say that was my first and hopefully my only plane crash.
Oh, wow.
And they took us off the plane. Now, it probably would have been much more exciting, if they let us use the slides, but, they just told us to get off the plane normally. Now, fortunately, I was traveling for a conference at the time, so I didn't have a patient. But, even in that situation, I was able to just call our travel agent and say, hey, had a problem, need to be rescheduled, and they were able to handle it internally. This is one of the things that we offer, where we're not dealing with a third party. We have direct access to the airline's reservation systems, and we can make whatever changes are needed for whatever reason. So if there's a weather delay, in many cases, our nurses who are on the plane will find out about it when they land. Our flight team has already made the changes to accommodate any delays. So our coordinators will know about problems before our nurses do.
Gotcha. Great. Well, this is fascinating. We're going to take a real quick break. I promise, just a 30-second break, just to recognize the response. When we come back, we'll have some more questions for you, but you'll be able to share more information on your organization with our listeners. So do you know anyone who may be concerned about an older driver? Well, Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make the appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841 to connect with a Senior Care Authority advisor in your area. We are back with Bob Bacheler, who is the owner and managing director of Flying Angels. So Bob, tell us, I know you shared a little bit more about Flying Angels, but how can people learn more? And part two is just advice that you can give to people who just want to learn more after they heard this and they hear about your service, and they may have a loved one that may need your type of service. Where do they start? So maybe you could cover that. So it's kind of commercial time for you right here. Okay.
Well, that's terrific. Well, the easiest place to go to find out about us is to just go to our website, which is just flyingangels.com. And there we try to have a lot of information, a lot of helpful tips. And, we do try to be very, very transparent about costs. As a general rule, flying somebody around the United States is going to run about $8,000 to $10,000 in total, and that's everything. That's the flights, the nurse, the ground transportation. And we do break everything out line by line so they can see exactly what goes into it. I know that's a large amount. I often tell people my first car cost $125. So when I throw out a number like, $8,000 to $10,000, I do appreciate that is a significant amount of money. But I usually, once somebody sees, the cost breakdown and, the cost to get somebody, from their home or residence to the airport, by a wheelchair van or an ambulance, and then the cost of the flights, and then get the nurse there and get the nurse back. But that's the that's the first place to go. Just go to our website, and has a lot of information, kind of spells out, what we can do and how we do it. The other thing that I really encourage people to do is to Google Flying Angels Philadelphia. One of the great things about that is there are any number of places where people can see what other folks have said about Flying Angels. I can talk about Flying Angels till I'm blue in the face, but what I care about a lot more than what I say is what our clients have said about us in the past. And I know we share, you and I share the importance of reputation, and word of mouth, and what people say about you. And I sincerely believe that at Flying Angels we have created a great company. We've put together a great team, and I think that the very gracious and kind words that others have said about us probably speak more about our service than anything that I could possibly say. But I would say start off at flyingangels.com.
Perfect. So maybe you could share with us, and it's kind of a two-part question, whichever one you want to do first, but kind of if there is more of a typical or kind of average type of situation that you deal with pretty regularly. And then maybe you could give us some examples of situations that have been, pretty difficult, challenging ones. All right. So people understand kind of the range of type of services you provide.
Absolutely. So the probably the most common scenario that we run into is a family has an elderly loved one, or an elderly couple, mother and father, who have been living in some place for the last, 10 or 15 years. And the family and the couple have decided that, it's time to relocate. They want to come closer to family, or they've been living in their residence and it's now time for them to look at an assisted living facility. And again, they may be wanting to move across the country to do that, to be closer to family. And right. The children are scattered all over the country. And the question is going to be, how are they going to get their parents, their aging parents, to where they need to go? And what's fascinating, and a lot of the folks we're dealing with are in their 80s and 90s, and the children are in their 60s and 70s. So they're not really even capable of doing it. So, and the elderly person is wheelchair bound. They may or may not have cognitive impairments. But it can be a very daunting task to say, how are we going to move our parents? How are we going to move our loved ones, into their new facility? Well, the simple answer to that is they wind up calling us, and we do the complete package from bedside to bedside, and we coordinate everything. We arrange for the flights, and our nurse goes out on the day of transport and picks them up and takes them where they need to go, and the family doesn't have to be involved any more than that. Now, probably at about a third of our transports, there's a family member going with them, and families always welcome to travel with their loved ones if they like, but it's not necessarily required. To address your other question about some of the more complicated cases we do, when we get a call and we find out that, somebody wants to move mom who hasn't been out of a chair in 20 years, is completely non-ambulatory, can't stand up at all, and weighs 350 pounds, that can be a very daunting challenge. But that is kind of one of the things that we do regularly. Again, much like folks who have had spinal cord injuries or strokes, we're talking about people who can be large. We've done folks up to 400 pounds, and that can be a challenge, but it is certainly doable. Somebody who is completely non-mobile, non-weight bearing, is something that we can certainly do.
Yeah, I would say it's not only challenging from your own, the staff, but then could be challenging with some of the airlines as well. Somebody who is
that's one of that's one of the reasons that the airlines are always happy to see us on board, because we have a great reputation with the airlines. We have a great working relationship with them, and when their crews see our team, they kind of know that everything's taken care of. I have been on any number of flights where I look at some of the other passengers and I just say, oh boy, how are they going to do that without assistance? So whereas if our team was there, we would make it look easy.
Gotcha. So on your website, I actually took a look at your website. You talk a little bit about the differences between what you call emergent or non-emergent transports. Can you share with us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Well, an emergent transport, is often either by helicopter or by air ambulance. If somebody if somebody is injured on the side of the road and they need to get to a hospital, that's 100 miles away, in that case, it's going to be by helicopter, and that's something that you're setting up in a matter of minutes, where every second counts. That would be an emergent transport. If somebody, needs a life-threatening, has a life-threatening injury and, needs to get, to a specialty center, that may be, 500 or 600 miles away, and again, we're talking in a matter of hours, that's where a fixed wing air ambulance comes in. When I refer to non-emergent transports, we're talking about transports that are usually scheduled anywhere from 48 to 72 hours out. The vast majority of our transports occur in that window where somebody needs to be moved. They want to go reasonably quickly, but we're still talking about 2 or 3 days out. Now, some of our transports are scheduled weeks in advance, but for the vast majority of them, 48 to 96 hours out is probably our window of where we're transporting our patients.
Gotcha. Bob, this has been extremely informative. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll have to have you back because certainly I'm sure there's a lot more that we could be talking about. So thank you so much for joining us on Boomers today.
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, check it out, flyingangels.com. Thank you, everybody. Please be safe, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.